brown skin. And that, in fact, if people use that as a yardstick, or use that as a criteria for figuring out whether people are Kooris or not, inevitably they end up being completely wrong, mostly. I mean, you often see, and I mean, I still get asked it today in various media shows and that, every now and then in talks and that, oh, but you're only a part Aboriginal. I'm thinking to myself now, which part of it? And it's sort of, I don't hear too many people going around asking, or saying to white Australians, well, you're a part white Australian, or a part this. I mean, that sort of, in terms, if people want to look at it in terms of, especially after 200 years of what we've been talking about, of enforced assimilation attempts, of putting people on mass rape and murder and all this sort of stuff. It's a very silly thing to try and do, to sort of look at a person and judge their Kooriness by what people seem to figure out, or try and figure out, is how much Koori blood they got. I can take you up to certain places in top end of Australia, in Northern Territory, and introduce you to people who have got all your classic attributes of what the white Australia loves to call the full-blood Aboriginal. You know, the flat nose, you know, the eyebrows, and the black skin and all this sort of stuff, skinny ankles, among other things. And I can introduce you to people who look like that, but as soon as they open their mouth, and as soon as they start talking about various things and ideas and philosophy, it doesn't take very long to figure out that these people are actually white and Indian. Hence the term coconut. Brown on the outside and white on the inside. Or as red Indians call it in America. Apples, red on the outside and white on the inside. And so that's an important thing to sort of remember, because you can make some big clues. I mean, there's young people in this Koori community here in Melbourne who've got blonde hair and blue eyes. And yet, I've worked with one of these people who sort of fits that description for a long time. And when he was a young fellow and he was a student of mine at Swinburne, that was his first real contact with non-Koori people. And it was really interesting to sort of see the way in which he reacted. He could not relate. If he was in a room full of gubs, non-Koori people, incidentally, gub is not a derogatory term. Gub is a distinguishing term. I use it as a distinguishing term, a neutral distinguishing term, not as an offensive term. There are some people, and there are some Kooris who use it as a derogatory term, but it depends on the way you say it. So I'm using it as a neutral, distinguishing word. And you could put this fellow in a room full of gubs, and he would sort of, he wouldn't withdraw into a corner and sort of hide his body with suspicion. He would have extraordinary difficulty even conversing with these gubs because he felt so out of place. And yet, externally, if somebody else walked in the room and looked around the room, they might say to themselves, well, you know, he's a room full of gubs. So you can't go on colour of skin. That's not a factor in determining your Koori. On the other hand, you know, this is why sometimes I'm a bit critical of some of the born-again Kooris, the ones who come back. Maybe they're ones who were taken away when they're kids and that, and if they've been brought up for 25 years in a white family in a white world, they have been affected by that conditioning, that upbringing. And you can't come back to the community and say, oh look, you know, I'm so-and-so's son or brother and that, and I'm back and I'm a Koori again, you know. I now want to take up a job in a Koori organisation, do this, and that. It doesn't always work like that, because some of these born-agains, as I said the other day, come back to the community with a whole set of white values and a white sort of way of thinking about things and a white sort of approach to life and a white sense of time and space, all of which is alien to our community. And not, you know, sometimes these people don't realise the need to go through that re-Kooriisation process again. Some of them I don't think will ever succeed, really becoming a Koori again. I mean, it's very tragic and everything, but that's reality. If you want to, you know, if you want to define Kooris, which usually we don't, it seems everybody else in the world has this sort of desperate need to define us or fit us into some sort of category, or try and figure us out and understand it. I mean, a Koori. You want to find out who's a Koori, then the best person to ask is the Koori community. Simple as that. The Koori community knows who are Kooris, even if they've been taken away. I mean, you listen to the story of how Archie Roach came back with the Fitzroy community, walked down Gertrude Street, the first person he met. Virtually knew who he was. A couple of people later he met his sister. And Kooris know who the Kooris are. Kooris can tell Kooris have been away for a long time who their family is, who their connections are. And so, you know, don't fall into the trap that people do, of trying to distinguish the so-called, you know, full-blooded Kooris, proper Kooris, from the so-called half-caste or whatever other derogatory term that people want to dig up to describe people. This morning.
Gary, when I was in New Zealand, there was a bit of a furor because a Maori entertainer had died, and the Maoris wanted him to be buried according to Maori tradition, but the English people, the New Zealanders wanted to do it their way. So what are your feelings on that, and also marriages too, according to Maori tradition?
These are part of the problems that you find when there is a lack of mutual respect between people. And I would argue that Indigenous people, such as the Maoris, such as us, have historically, and even to this day, despite everything, been far more how can I put it? Been far more decent in our dealings with the societies that came here to this part of the world than the societies who came to this part of the world, their dealings with us. And I would argue that if you're in Aotearoa, like I said the other day, the land of the wrong white crowd, that's a Maori gag. I stole that one, folks. I've got to confess it. I can't even claim that. Then it seems logical to me that if the Indigenous people of Aotearoa, whose traditions and customs have been there significantly longer than the people who've come in the last couple hundred years, if they desire a certain thing for one of their people, then that should be respected. And it's the same here. You know, I think that people, I mean, now I heard somebody on radio yesterday before, I think it was yesterday morning, while I was trying to think about what I was going to talk about yesterday. But I heard somebody on the radio, some academic, who actually, for a change, said something reasonably intelligent. He was talking about Indonesia and Australians' attitude to nations that are our neighbours and trying to impose our values on them. I mean, he was talking about East Timor, which made me a bit nervous. But, the important thing that this person was saying was that who the hell are the Australians who've come out here and spent 200 years destroying everything native and indigenous and good that they could find? Who are we, who is we as a nation, to turn around and tell the people who've had their own cultural traditions and everything that have sustained them for considerably longer than this lot who've come out here in the last couple hundred years, who in fact destroyed more things than they've ever, you know, sought to preserve or maintain. I think that people ultimately are going to have to learn to respect Aboriginal culture. The first step towards doing that is for people to learn about it, to learn anything about Koori. I mean, this is why there should be 1 million of these going on every year, where people can come together and sort of talk with mutual respect and attempt to sort of attain some degree of mutual understanding. I don't think there's too many Kooris around who need to be taught too much about understanding white Australia and how it operates and functions. So therefore I don't see the need to have mass education programs for Koori people in understanding white Australia. Every 5-year-old Koori kid in the city knows more about the true nature of white Australian society than the vast majority of white Australia. By the time that kid's a teenager, they're among the best psychologists in the world in trying to understand, because you've got to anticipate white fellas sometimes. Where I grew up, it was vitally important, a vitally important attribute in your survival skills as a black fella, was to be able to sense when some of the white fellows were going to turn on you. You know, it's a sort of, if you're living in a, if you're going to a school like I was in, Maxwell High School, where just before they threw me out, I was the first Koori to go past third form, and I found out why. How come they threw me out? They didn't like black guys going that far in their school, and they threw me out. But I was still a bit naive, about 13. And so I'm in a class full of white fellas, and even my friends in that class, you had to watch them and be wary of them, because the sort of peer group pressure in a really ultra-racist little town like that, the sort of social dynamics that work there are really interesting. And even the people who were my friends, there was only one kid in that who I went to school with, one white kid, who I ever considered my true friend, because he was the one who never, when the other white kids started razzing people who were ostensibly my friends, about being a friend of a bloody poor black guy, he was the only one who never then turned on me, just to re-establish his racist credentials with them, which is what all the other ones did. And so it's not a question when it comes to mutual understanding of Kooris needing to learn any more about understanding white Australia. I think we know your society real well. I think that our analysis and understanding of your society is far superior to most of the so-called intellectuals in your society. E.g. Donald Paul. What a joke. Sorry. So therefore, you know, we need more understanding on the part of white Australia towards us, and that's part of your task. And I know that most of you involved here already have talked to others external from here about this sort of thing here, and that in itself, as I said the other day, is the only thing you ever did, even if it's worth doing this week. The only thing you ever did was walk away from here after this week and talk to one other Australian who's never ever sat down and really seriously thought about the issue, or never really had the challenge of a serious, reasonably intelligent, rational debate about Koori people. If you do that with one other person, you will then have done more than most people in this society will ever do in their entire lifetime in terms of promoting better understanding between people in this country. Of course, I hope that you're going to talk to a hell of a lot more than one person. I mean, that's the way it works. But that's up to you, you know. I'm not here to tell you to do nothing. My task this week has simply been to try and give you a little bit of an understanding into a perspective of the Koori community that I think is far more important perspective for people to grasp than some of the bullshit courses you'll be hearing here next week at Melbourne Uni, for example, on Aboriginal stuff, or some of the other shonky courses that are run by coconuts that you can go to, and some of the training programs for public servants that they have, where they get the ultra-tamest of the coconuts and the aquaton to go and sort of talk about silly things that don't really count and don't really get to the core of what it's all about. And always remember that ultimately, I mean, part of my purpose in doing this is not just for money. Although I'm going to buy myself a decent pair of shoes next week. Thank you very much, folks. For the first time for a long time I don't have it. But in the final analysis also, I mean, what we're about as Aboriginal activists, the particular wing from whence I am, is more than just achieving justice and an acceptable niche for Koori people in the Australia of tomorrow. I mean, if we achieve our desire of land rights, if we can achieve in each Koori community in Australia that so desires a level of economic independence where they're in control of their own affairs, where they genuinely for the first time are able to determine their own destiny, for the first time in 200 years, and communities of Koori people are able to make decisions about their future, about their children's future, to make plans without having to go cap in hand to some bureaucrat in Canberra in some ivory tower who's got no idea of the real problems on the ground from whence you come as a Koori. Once you've attained that economic independence, this is why economic independence is so important, it seems to me, in the scheme of things. Despite everything else they say about this society, being Christian and everything, this society, the major motivating force in this society is money. Not the major motivating force in society, white society, is greed, but it comes down to money. And the only way Koori people, it seems to me, are ever going to be able to control their own affairs in such a society that has those sort of values as the paramount things to aspire to, and hold up Australian businessmen and entrepreneurs as great examples for all Australians to, admire and everything, then we have to attain our own economic independence as communities of people, like I said. Now people say, well, how can you give land rights to Aboriginal people all over Australia? Well, the first thing is, you don't look at whole areas of Australia and say, oh, well, in that place, in that huge tract of area there, that state of Queensland, will give all of Aboriginal Queensland this. And that may not work, because if you're an Aboriginal community, say down in Sherburne, near Mergen, in Bajilki-Peterson country, in the south west of Queensland, the situation that you live in there, on that mission station, on that reserve, on that ex-concentration camp, and the problems that confront your community there, and the possibilities, the economic possibilities that may exist for your community there, if you owned as a community the land that reserve exists on, the situation there may be radically different to up in Cape York somewhere, up in Aragon. So you can't apply a universal answer to even an area like a state in Australia. I would argue that you can't even in Victoria, which is a far more compact example, the potential programs that are needed and the work and the developments that are needed to be done in an urban community like Fitzroy are obviously radically different to the situation that exists in Shepparton, just a few hundred miles away. So, it seems to me, one day the decision makers and the bureaucrats and the people with the power, they've got any brains, which they haven't from my observation so far. But sooner or later somebody has to realise that there needs to be, the whole land rights thing needs to be resolved nationally with dealings with each individual community of Aboriginal people in this country, separate to everything else. The only people, and this is the guts of my political philosophy, I believe in maximum decentralisation of power and decision making. And that maximum decentralisation means that nobody outside of the Nambucca Heads Aboriginal community should have a say in what they do. They should be given the land on which they exist, in the way in which I described the other day. They should be, all communities in the south especially, where the destruction is far more complete than in other parts of Australia. Again, only an accident of history, like I said. The only reason you've got so-called full-blood Aboriginal people walking around Arnhem Land with much of their cultural traditions and languages intact is because Captain Cook landed in Sydney Harbour and not Darwin Harbour. If Captain Cook had landed in Darwin Harbour, the whole history of Australia, our history, may be a lot different. We might be the ones who the Labor Party has come and chasing after to hand over huge amounts of land so that they can con the Australian people into believing that Aborigines have got land rights. And it might be the mob in the north who are starved of resources and who are left without any real sort of attempt to maybe solve their problem because some cynical politician knows that the Australian people don't give a fuck about them because they're only part Aborigines and we can argue our way out of giving them anything. And we can maintain the pretence that we have given Aboriginal people something by Point in Arnhem down here in the south. So each individual Aboriginal community, it seems to me, has to do make their own decisions. I believe they should be given the opportunity to become economically independent, and once those communities are economically independent, it's then up to each individual Aboriginal community in this country to determine for themselves what they want to do. Now some of those communities, of which I've got no doubt there are some, if some of those communities as a community, as a total community of people say to themselves, well look, we believe that the future for our people in this area here, and we've thought about it, talked about it, and we believe the best future for our children is for us to send them to school and let them become assimilated and all that sort of stuff. Well, c'est la vie. That's their decision. And people don't have to respect that. And if another community of people, which again I know communities like this, decide, well, fuck it, white farmers, after the way they've treated us for the last 200 years, the last thing we want is any involvement with them, and they might build a dirty great wall around their community and say, no whites, this is our own self-imposed apartheid. We choose to separate. We choose separate but equal development. And in that instance, well, people are going to have to accept that too. As long as the decisions are legitimately coming from the people who live in those communities themselves. That's the sort of way I envisage a national land rights plan being implemented. It can't be done on a regional basis. You create little power structures that give small groups some sort of say over large areas, like ATSIC is right now, then you've got problems. I mean, power corrupts. When are people going to realise the truth in that? I mean, when I was director of the Aboriginal Arts Board, that's my little 3-year term in the 80s, I had what I finally figured out was basically the illusion of power. But I did have a few interesting little powers as a senior public servant. Amongst them was, fortuitously amongst them was, I discovered by accident, nobody told me about this, but I discovered this by accident that under the Australian Customs Act, at that time and to this day, technically nothing Aboriginal, and that includes Aborigines and bits of Aborigines, consisted in the Aboriginal Arts Board itself. Not once in the 3 years I worked at the Aboriginal Arts Board, but the Aboriginal Arts Board itself, which is the representatives from around Australia who come to discuss the allocation of grants, not once did they ever vote in any board meeting on any issue. All issues, all grants, all decisions at the Aboriginal Arts Board, with the board itself when I worked there, were made by consensus decision, which is the Koori way of doing things. It was the first time in the history of the Aboriginal Arts Board that decisions were made in that manner. And if people want to look back, the record speaks for itself. The least number of complaints, the maximum number of recipients of grants in the whole history of the Aboriginal Arts Board. Since I left, the system has been taken over by the Govs again and stuffed up. But within the staff itself, like I said, I got rid of the hierarchical system. We instituted a system whereby every week all the staff had a meeting and discussed the major issues of the week and what was going to happen. And we made decisions by consensus again. It wasn't a question of the director giving an order and the people doing it. A secretary in the Aboriginal Arts Board, when I ran it, had as much say in the day-to-day running of the whole ship and in the decision-making of some of the major decisions. She had as much say, or he or she had as much say in those decisions as the director, myself, did. We then, having achieved that, I then turned my attention to the salary structure. And I was on $45,000 a year. This is, what, almost 8 years ago. And I thought this was an outrageous and scandalous amount of money. I'd never earned that sort of money before in my life. And quite frankly, I didn't know what to do with it all. Although I got a lot of advice, I must tell you. A lot of advice. And so I tried to introduce a system in the Aboriginal Arts Board. I went to talk to the administration of the Australian Council. I said, listen, we're socialists down there. And after I picked the bloke up on the floor of my wife, I said, I want to introduce a system down there where I'm prepared to take a $20,000 pay cut if we can restructure the salary system down there so that everybody who's working in an office gets the same salary. And this was most perplexing to the administration of the Australian Council. They couldn't handle this at all. There was all sorts of muttering about, you know, precedents being set and all this sort of crap. And they refused to allow me to do it. And so in the end, that's the only part of the thing that wasn't fully implemented. We worked out a slight system of redistribution of wealth within the board itself, but it was an informal thing. We couldn't do it through the bureaucracy itself. And so the Aboriginal Arts Board, in my time as director, was a unique part of the Australian bureaucracy. And I mean, these are part of the reasons why ultimately Clyde Holding and Barry Cohen, these two duplicitous, double-talking, corrupt pigs, that's why they got rid of me. It's very interesting though, when I had my final fight at the Aboriginal Arts Board and got turfed, and one of the few political battles I lost with Clyde Holding, the issue that they forced me out over was that I complained bitterly, tried to make a lot of noise about this shonky Aboriginal arts company that they were setting up. This company was to become the Australian government's national Aboriginal arts marketing organisation. And the thing was as shocking as hell from day one. I mean, they proposed to appoint as the boss of it this guy who, I mean, gee, there have been some crooks and scoundrels that I've seen in Aboriginal affairs in the last 20 years, but this person ranks amongst the top 10. And I couldn't understand why Holding and Barry Cohen were so keen to get this type of setup in the first place, and these type of people running it. And I started to make a few noises about this. Sounded like a pretty shocking, corrupt deal to me, and they come down on me like a ton of bricks. But the beauty of the story is about 2 months ago, I picked up the Melbourne Age, I think it was, no, Sydney Morning Herald, when I was in Sydney, to read with much delight that the company that they had set up had just gone into liquidation, and that the man that Clyde Holding and Barry Cohen installed as its boss against my vehement sort of opposition is now being sought as we speak by Interpol. So I'm very pleased. And I think that people look at I don't want to go into it now, but the Aboriginal Arts Board was, I believe, an example of how, if you're going to have bureaucracies involved in Aboriginal affairs, which at the moment looks inevitable, until we get some sort of reasonably intelligent people in government, but that's almost a contradiction in itself, isn't it? Then those bureaucracies must be sensitised to Aboriginal people. They must be operate in a manner through which they can communicate with and achieve desirable results in conjunction with Koori communities. This is why, this is a substantial reason, part of the reason why, despite all of this money, as I keep talking about, being spent, the statistics stay essentially the same. I mean, you look at, if you can get your hands on the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Deaths and Custody, look at the statistics that have been produced in that, and then go away and get the National Eye Health and Trachoma report produced by Fred Hollows, when they did the biggest, to this day, the most massive Aboriginal health operation ever conducted in this country, a single operation, was the National Eye Health and Trachoma program done by Fred Hollows, the Australian of the Year. Instead of Australian of the Year, it's ridiculous. But in the trachoma report, I mean, many of the statistics, the basic health statistics that are reviewed, and that's what, 10, 15 years before the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Deaths in Custody. Compare the two lots of statistics, folks. Very little change in those years, and yet you then go away and look up the annual reports of the Department of Aboriginal Affairs and see how much money was spent in that same time, and look how much of that money was spent on Aboriginal health, and then say to yourself, as Aboriginal people do daily, where in the hell did all the money go? And that's why I was saying yesterday about, those of you who may be going to work in jobs in Aboriginal communities, just always check a few preconditions, or have a checklist in your head to make sure that you're not going to become part of the problem. And like I said yesterday, don't be discouraged by what I said, because there are numerous. I mean, there's been literally hundreds over the years of non-Aboriginal people who have done magnificent jobs in Koori communities and Koori organisations with Koori people, and who've been sadly missed when they went. And they're not the sort of people who I call part of the problem. They're the mobile part of the solution. They're the people who are prepared to work at the behest of Aboriginal people, to understand the importance of Aboriginal people controlling their own affairs, and understand that Aboriginal people still nevertheless need certain technical advice and assistance, but that technical advice and assistance should be delivered in a mutually respectful way, and in a way which doesn't impinge on Aboriginal people's integrity, that doesn't compromise Aboriginal control of their own affairs. If you can sort of fit into those conditions, no hassle. And at least by thinking about that before you go in, you've done more than most people do when they go into those jobs. Most people don't even think about the most fundamental sort of issues like that. I mean, most people don't realise that those are important issues. They're more interested in how they're going to get on a personal level with the Kooris themselves. I mean, that's important, but an important part of how you get on with the Kooris themselves depends on how you behave when you go into a Koori community, whether you've done the right thing in the way in which you ended up there in the first place. Any questions? And they were supposed to be out here on a goodwill program, you know, these nice little black nurses from Australia would show them around. These nurses went and had a look at Aboriginal communities in Australia, and they said on radio, I listened to the interview, it was a brilliant interview, with these nurses saying, you know, look, this situation here is far worse than anything in South Africa. This is terrible, this is shocking. And this created great embarrassment to Australia. And whilst the more the focus on Australia is going to keep shifting with this new world order of George Bush and these characters, the world is rapidly changing. You can't sort of do the sort of things that continue to happen in Australia and get away with it. And there's no, you know, all of the bullshit under the sun. I said this the other day, it's difficult having a logical, rational discussion with your average Joe Blow white Australian in the street about Aboriginal, as it is trying to have that conversation about, you know, what the situation in Northern Ireland is in London. It's impossible. I tried it in London. I was lucky to get out alive. But you can't do it here. So, I mean, you know, people have got to realise that the international pressure is going to come on Australia sooner or later, because there are certain fundamental issues here that need to be addressed. The Americans, by comparison, look ironically very advanced in terms of their relation with their Indians, even though quite a few Native American people here probably vehemently disagree with that. But relatively, they are better off over there. And isn't it ironic that Australian people will flock in droves to a film like Dances with Wolves and come out feeling so warm and so, you know, good inside and thinking, wow, isn't that terrible what they've done to the Native American people? They go to those films, and they do, and they come out and they think, wow. And most of them, never in their own head, think to themselves, hang on a sec, that's exactly what happened here. It's exactly what happened here. And yet, and Australians are never going to do that while ever white Australian filmmakers have got to say. Because if you look at, and this is a pet hate of mine, is all of these arty-farty, you know, up themselves Australian filmmakers going around making their little particular film on the balls, I mean on Aborigines, to try and make their statement, whatever their statement might be. I mean, they all seem to try it, and they all, because they refuse to, because they all think that, you know, look, it's my statement, this is going to be my statement, you know, me, Fred Skepsy, this will be my, and so it creates this thing without any reference to Koori people, doesn't ask Koori people, and so all the time they keep on producing these films that do not accurately portray the Aboriginal experience on that film screen. And so is it any wonder that Australians remain in the sort of ignorance that they're in, with the sort of stuff they read in the media about it? Then they go see these movies. Now, usually the movies are various sorts. I mean, The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith was actually, I thought, quite a good book by Keneally. I thought in the book that Keneally did manage to convey some of the motivation for this crazy, well, for this supposedly crazy Jimmy Blacksmith for committing this act of violence. And I thought that the book established that that motivation was the racist harassment to which Jimmy Governor was subjected constantly. But in the film, is that sort of motivation established? No way. I mean, Fred Skepsy, big fancy man, fresh from his success, what is it? Devil's Playground, and fresh from his great success in the Australian advertising industry, goes along to make his statement. And his film ends up being less a statement of motivation and trying to analyse the forces in Australian society, the racism that was there that motivated this guy. It instead it becomes the whole issue of the film focuses around this arty-farty act scene where there's all this violence and there was much agonising over the certificate of film should and all this sort of crap. Now, Backroads, a great film, it's a great film, was made the same year as The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith. The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith was made for $2.5 million. The Backroads was made for 25 grand. And in fact, 25,000 bucks, and we run out of money 4 weeks into the shoot. So the last 2 weeks, I'm still out of money for making that film. That's 15, 16 years ago. But Backroads was a different approach altogether. And it's no accident that Backroads and Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith showed at Cannes Film Festival in '78. Backroads got rave reviews. Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith went down the drain. Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith and Backroads opened together. I mean, the same theatre, thank Christ. But they opened at the same time in London. Backroads played for 6 months in London. Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith closed after 3 weeks. Now, Backroads was a test run of how white Australian filmmakers, if they want to make films about black people, which I'm opposed to, then this is how you do it. For the first 3 weeks, I mean, I had this crazy maniac called Phil Noyce come and visit me one day in Redfern. He was talking about making this movie, and I thought, oh yeah. And he was talking about me helping him with the script. I said, yeah, all right. And I looked at the script and it was a load of shit. And so I did a bit of work on it with him. And then he decided to make a movie, and I said, he talked me into being an advisor on it. And then as we left Sydney to go to Bourke for this scouting location home, he turned around and said he wanted me to play the lead role, which was interesting. But I said to Noyce, if you want to make a film about blackfellas, and this is a film in the northwest of New South Wales, then the first thing you've got to do is come with me up to Bourke Reserve and Warren Reserve, and we're going to go and sit down there and we're going to talk to them all up there, and you're going to explain to them what you want to do, and we're going to tell them everything that they want to know, and if they say yes, we do it. If they say no, we don't. It's simple. And so we went to Noyce's everlasting credit. He agreed to do this, and we went on this trip into the northwest, sat down on the mission on the reserve in Bourke with the people there, had a big meeting, explained to them what we would like to do. If they're indulgent, they're support and assistance. And they had a yarn about it over a few days, thought about it, asked us all these questions, got certain guarantees out of us, and on the basis of that said, yeah, okay, no worries. We then went to Brewarrina and did the same thing with the local Kooris in Dodge City Mission. Great place, Dodge City, amazing. Brewarrina, and we did it that way. We then, when we came back 3 weeks later with the film crew, again, every inch of the way, when we were working with Kooris, we had people from the local community employed in the film. In fact, the only people who got paid equity rates for acting in the film were the Kooris in Bourke and Brewarrina. Even me and Zach Martin, who two main Koori actors in the film, didn't get equity rates because we couldn't afford to pay us equity rates. The other thing that we did, we used the music of Dougie Young, who in his day, I reckon, was the Archie Roach of his time. Dougie Young was an old Gumi, a legendary blackfellow who lived in the northwest of the missions and that up there, at New South Wales, and who was recorded on tape by an anthropologist by the name of Jeremy Beckett from Sydney University in about 1963, singing some of his songs. And Dougie Young's songs were songs from the Koori camp. They were songs about, there were classics like Victor Potham and his Rusty Hut, another classic, Pass Him the Flagon Boys, and these great songs that were songs about living on the mission, living on the concentration camps, the desperation to drink anything to try and ease your pain. In those days, there's a song, one of Dougie Young's songs is called the Three Sharp Turns. That's about drinking methane. And it's called the Three Sharp Turns because methylated spirits used to come in a triangular bottle. And that's what the blackfellas used to call it. We're going to go and get a Three Sharp Turns, boys. And so, Dougie Young, I'd heard his music when I first started working for the legal service and did some work in Bourke in the very early 70s. And I'd heard the recordings that Jeremy Beckett had done. And I think that Dougie Young, I'm going to write something about Dougie Young one day because he occupies an important place in Koori folklore and Koori political history for that matter. But I wanted to use Dougie Young's music in backgrounds, which we did. The song opens with a Dougie Young song. And I was determined, I wasn't sure whether Dougie Young was still alive at that time. And I made Noyce guarantee me that we would set aside whatever payments we made sure that we paid, set aside significant monies to pay royalties to Dougie Young for the use of his songs. And it took us 2 years to track him down, but we tracked him down. We found him still alive and I made sure he got his money. It's the only time that I know of that in Australian film that's ever used any Koori music that people have got the right thing done by. So the presentation of Aboriginal people in films, in Australian films, has been pretty appalling so far. The Fringe Dwellers, that fucking awful film by Bruce Beresford, really grates on my nerves because every time, it's a classic example of how white people can't write scripts about Koori. Because you look at that film, every time those Aboriginal people in that film open their mouth, out come pure white middle class values, sounds, and everything. It just jars as being so totally false. It really irks me. And yet, all those Australians who went and saw that film and came away with a warm feeling in their heart and all this sort of shit, are going to go away from that film with a totally false perception of who and what Kooris are. And that then maintains and perpetuates the gulf of misunderstanding that exists. It maintains and perpetuates the stereotypes. It maintains and perpetuates the misconception. And that's why I get so angry about Australian filmmakers wanting to do that. It's important, and I think that Spike Lee in his first few films proved it. The Koori people here have got to make their own statements in the same way as people in whatever black community in England, be it Pakistani or the West Indian or whatever, those people from those communities are the only ones who are going to make a legitimate statement from those communities. And that's what most black filmmaking will be in the world at the moment. And the only legitimate statement that will come from Aboriginal Australia, film-wise, is going to be the days when either I make my film, or I like some of Tracy Moffat's stuff. Whether she'll go on to become a Spike Lee of Australia, I don't know. I don't know. She's a strange young girl, Tracy Moffat, but I really like her Nice Colour Girls. It's an interesting film, but it created a lot of controversy in the Koori community. A lot of Koori women reckon it degraded Koori women. But I think the Koori women who said that, I think that the Koori women who accused Tracy of that didn't understand the film. The film's called Nice Colour Girls. In fact, I've got a copy here somewhere.
So what about Deadly?
Well, it's dead at the moment, fortuitously. Who said that? Deadly is this shocking, ratchet, terrible Australian film made by an ex-friend of mine, Esmond Storm. I've known him for 20 years, and it wasn't until he was about to make Deadly that I realised that he was a Nazi. Show, folks, just goes to show. Even someone as perceptive as me can fool for all that time. And it's a film that involves the theme, as its theme, death in custody. But the thing that I thought was so perverse about the first script of that film that I saw, because Esmond did make the mistake of employing me briefly at the beginning as a script consultant, which meant that I got to see the first draft of the script, which was terrible. Basically it had Aboriginal deaths an Aboriginal death in custody as a background story for a love story between a Brian Brown and a Rachel Ward-Thompson. It was sick. It was off. And from my knowledge, the final versions of the script wasn't much better, but I haven't seen it yet, so I shouldn't say nasty. But because Esmond had to sell his soul to the Yanks to make the film, the American distributors have got it, and it's unlikely, with luck, it'll ever be released in Australia. I hope.
Gary, would your films show your last story, if you could make one?
That's what Backroads did.
Oh, isn't it? Oh, right.
Well, not quite. I was shot in Backroads, didn't I?
Was Backroads, I can see Backroads, did that cover
You're
this?
culturally deprived, Judith. I'm going to have to lend you a copy of it. So.
It's on video.
Right.
Video
Yeah.
store.
In fact, I've got a copy of it here. We might show it to you later. No, we haven't got time.
Did that show the setting up of the embassy?
No, that showed mad, drunken escapades in the northwest of New South Wales. And Billy Hunter.
Well, it's not here, but
Incidentally, Billy Hunter, what a disappointment. There's a man who co-starred with me in Backroads, and who actually, I chose him for that role because we knew Billy then, because he was one of the few white fellas I knew in around about 75, 76, who could walk on any Aboriginal reserve in New South Wales and people knew he wasn't, he knew people, and he was quite well known. He's a good bloke. And then after we made Backroads, Noyson used him as the lead role in Newsfront, and then Hunter won the Best Australian Actor of the Year and all this sort of stuff, and it went to his head, and he signed this $250,000 deal with BHP to become the big Australian. It was pathetic, it was terrible, and there he was. I watched him one day in one of those BHP ads, stomping around some Native American reserve somewhere in Arizona, talking about the great benefits that BHP was bringing to these people by digging up their land. That was like again, that was Billy. Billy was one of the few, and I'm not allowed to slander him like this, Billy was one of the few white fellas that I've ever known, who actually owed money to black fellas. Before Billy made it big with Newsfront, Billy was, that's one of the reasons I think black fellas related to him so much, because he carried on like a black fella. He was always touching around us all the time. And a lot of people, a lot of Kooris gave me money, and when we lend people money, it's not a question of it coming back, it's not a question of lending and I'll give it back to you at a specified time, it's a loose. And the deal always is that while you're down and out, you'll get looked after. But when you get some yourself, you know, you've got to do the right thing and sort of spread it. And so when Billy signed his contract with BHP, he used to drink at the Beach Motel in Sydney, and he was there every night right up until the day he signed the contract, and then he disappeared. And nobody saw him again. Some sort of a mature assessment of a mature, logical and rational assessment of what might constitute a flag of the future. Inevitably, there has to be recognition of that 39 whatever foot of time that Koori's been, you know. In fact, that's why the Koori part of the flag should maybe be the biggest part, because that represents we've been here the longest. But it would ruin a Koori flag to have a little southern cross in the corner like that, wouldn't it?
That's the problem.
But obviously, a new flag is inevitable in Australia. It must, as Australia changes from being the Anglo sort of nation that it has been, with the influence of all of these new cultures that are here, which I think is one of the most positive things that has happened in my lifetime that I can observe. And as I keep saying, they seem to have had a very good civilising influence. But it seems to me that we need not only, you know, we need new symbols and things that reflect the different course that this nation is now going. But there has to be, first and foremost, some form of reconciliation. Shouldn't have said that. Some sort of, but there needs to be some sort of resolution of the oldest existing problem in this country. And so I'd welcome a new flag, but I'd like to make sure that what this flag is doing is representing a new country, a new nation, a new direction, a new, I don't know, a new sort of society emerging, one would hope.
I would be interested to hear your comments on Aboriginally controlled and origin media outlets, such as exist in Alice Springs. There's Karma, Timer. Let's explain to some of the other people here what they are, how you feel about them, where they get their money from. There's Radio Redfern in Sydney. Is it really community controlled and origin, as it's obviously stated?
Is it still going?
Direction.
One of the important sort of things that has emerged in probably beginning in the late 70s and intensely during the 80s, I suppose, but it must be said that the very first Aboriginal radio program in Australia was a program that was conducted in 1973 by myself and Bruce McGuinness on Radio 3ZZZ. And the tapes of some of those programs, this was just a little 15-minute program a week. That was our allocation on the ethnic station, 3ZZZ. But some of the tapes of those shows are now classics, because we didn't bother trying to, in the space of 15 minutes, trying to get too much heavy, serious political sort of haranguing going on. We used to just go in and do various sketches off the top of our heads, just for the hell of it, and make our points that way. For example, one of the sketches that we did was the arrival of Captain Cook in Australia, whereby I was playing the role of a sports broadcaster for the ABC, the Aboriginal Broadcasting Commission, and I was doing a live broadcast of the annual regatta on Botany Bay, and we were right in the middle of the bark canoe race. This everything was disrupted by this really great thing sailing into the harbour this weekend. And so I raced over with the microphone, and as this boat rode into shore, I did the first live interview with the arrival of Captain Cook in Australia, and stuff like that. And we had another one where we did McGuinness played Captain Cook in that one. Another one, McGuinness played Professor Jackie, world famous Aboriginal anthropologist who was doing a study on the weird, wonderful mating habits of white Australians. And so, you know, we used to do things like that. Like I say, some of those tapes from those shows are classics. They're hard to get your hand. I haven't even got them, but I know that some people around Melbourne have got copies of them. But Aboriginal broadcasting is an important new sort of thing that's emerged because, again, you know, for the same reasons I keep on saying, Aboriginal control of their own affairs is really important. The information in the past that's been pumped into our community has been pumped in by foreign-owned peoples, you know, and it's been a foreign message. It's had alien content. It's sort of many of the sort of values of things that have been our children are being exposed to are sort of dangerous concepts from our point of view, and they subvert the minds of our children. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it, folks? Sounds like American television and your kids and my kids. But Karma in the Central Australian Aboriginal Media Association in Alice Springs, if any of you ever up there, it's worth going and having a look at the setup that they run. I mean, I would argue that Karma has made the same mistake as most Aboriginal organisations in Central Australia in becoming too reliant upon foreign technologies, i.e. non-Aboriginal technicians and other staff in important positions in administrative and key technical positions. And I don't believe that I saw, up until the last time I was in Alice Springs, genuine attempts to train Aboriginal people to take over these positions from those non-Aboriginal people. It seemed to me that yet again, as with the Central Land Council and Northern Land Council, there are certain sorts of white parasites who are moving in on those organisations, who are moving in, ingratiating themselves with certain key Aboriginal people in some of these organisations, and then establishing their own little empires within these organisations, where they accumulate and retain an enormous amount of power, and then become very difficult to debate. That's my only criticism of Karma, I think. And I think that some of the programming, therefore, is then reflected in that. And I think that Karma's in a really difficult position because of their reliance on the federal government to help pay for the cost of the satellite and all that sort of stuff. And this has led to compromise in the programming. I mean, Jesus Christ. But part of the original Karma submission that I read when I was director of the Aboriginal Arts Board, in terms of getting that licence, was that to protect Aboriginal communities from unfortunate sort of cultural influences being beamed into their communities in these TV screens. So you go up there and what do you see at the end of the on television? You see fucking Dynasty and crap like this. And, that concerns me. I mean, that's the compromises that Karma has been forced into making because they haven't really got the sort of economic independence as a unit there that they should have. Means that compromises are made in programming and all the rest of it because you've got a whole army, virtually all of the white Northern Territorial population, 99% of whom are fucking redneck racist maniacs, are all desperately hanging out and waiting for Karma to fall to pieces. Any Aboriginal organisations, there's always these white vultures sitting around waiting so they can say, see, they can't fucking run around affairs, they're useless, they're all drunks, they should have white fellas in there running for them or whatever, or you're wasting your money on it. And so this leads Karma, probably via some of the white technicians and white people who say in the organisation, to err on the side of caution rather than anything else. And that inevitably leads to the sort of program and compromises that you've seen in Parge television, that is. Now, Karma Radio, nevertheless, is a spectacularly brilliant thing. I mean, broadcasting God knows how many languages in that area. And for young kids who are already under extraordinary enough pressure through a range of new influences that are coming in their community, to have their languages reinforced through the information that's coming through on the radio in their language is a really important, vital thing, I would have thought. I mean, it's going to be really difficult for future generations of Aboriginal people, especially in the north of Australia. I mean, one of the biggest battles I would have thought is going to be that, as their kids grow up, more and more of those kids are going to want to in order to gain certain skills, some of those kids are going to have to leave those communities and go into urban areas in the territory where they're subjected to a whole range of influence. Sort of influence I was talking about before to my kids, whereby, my son thinks I'm the world's biggest bastard because I won't let him eat McDonald's, and he can't understand why. And he sort of won't wear any sort of shoes unless they've got Reeboks written on them. And all this sort of weird sort of indoctrination of our kids into, I mean, you walk around the streets today, walk around this university today, look at the young people, they look like fucking imitations of American kids. I mean, what is this? Is this Australia or what? And yet, that's an example of how that sort of subtle indoctrination is occurring. And so we're in a bit of a double bind because, I'm trying to sort of encourage my, maintain my core values and everything in my sons. And yet they're sort of not just being influenced by white Australian sort of values, In fact, I think more dangerous at this point in time with my mad 14-year-old is these fucking American values that are being pumped into it. And it's going to be interesting to see how Aboriginal communities in the North cope with that, because I don't know how many of those communities really realise they're just on the beginning of their exposure to that sort of technology, that sort of technological informational input in communities through television, that sort of stuff. This is new to them. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the elders in some of those communities cope with it, a lot of that, and the pressures that that's going to bring in the future up there, and what it's going to do to their kids, what it's going to do to their culture. You know? Because that's a creeping form of genocide. If you destroy those people's language and traditional customs, then, you know, that's genocide as much as walking up and mowing them all down with a machine gun. Next one.
How do you see the role of Bachelor College up there?
Well, I don't see the role of Bachelor College that much. No, I really couldn't say. I've been to Bachelor College once in my life. They couldn't get me out the door quick enough. I did a series of lectures there, but it's so long ago. It's easily 10 years ago. And I really don't know what's going on there at the moment. But all of those sort of education programs that exist around Australia, I think it's really important that they continue to be where, you know, as quickly as possible, Aboriginal people need to be being trained and actually assuming the various positions, teaching positions and administrative positions in those things. When the government closed down Koori College down here in Fitzroy last year, they closed down still, to this day, the only genuinely Aboriginal community controlled educational program in this country. I mean, that is to say, education program that is both preschool. There's a lot of Koori controlled preschools about it. But once the kids get out of preschool, they're in the hands of white teachers basically, and white systems basically. And I mean, I reckon that Koori College, there was a radical difference between the way in which Koori College was run and what we taught and the students that we turned out, and the sort of students and the way things are run in South Australia and those abundance of programs over there. And I mean, there's a new phenomenon emerging too that's beyond my experience that I discovered last year when I was up in central Queensland, and I accidentally got talked into doing a talk at University of Central Queensland at Rockhampton. And I walked into a lecture theatre a bit bigger than this, and to my shock, most of the faces sitting there looking back at me were black. And I thought, geez, what's going on here? They brought in all the locals or something. And it turned out I was told after the talk that there's something like 140 Koori students going to that uni. And that's unbelievable. I mean, that really freaked me out. Even last year here, when I didn't actually get to see all of the Koori students that were here, but there was quite a few going to this program over here. I mean, those sort of things are amazing to me, because I can remember, it doesn't seem that long ago to me, when Bruce McGuinness was going to Monash Uni in 73, there was only him and David Anderson there, and they were the only two Kooris, and I mean, that was considered really spectacular, that there was actually a couple of Kooris out of university here. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what this sudden mass production of Aboriginal graduates is going to do. I mean, who knows? These could well be the thin edge of the wedge with the new black middle class that's really going to screw us. Then again, they might turn out to be all good, very smart radicals like me, although that's very unlikely. And so it's going to be interesting as Aboriginal people gain all of this expertise and knowledge and that. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, because inevitably a lot of those people are going to be attracted by the sort of, they're going to make a lot more money than Koori do or something. And money, like power, corrupts, inevitably. Sure as the sun comes up the line. I'm glad I didn't know. But by the same token, as I said on the first day of this course, I think, I don't think people should underestimate the potential influence that Koori people can have in the Australia tomorrow. Australia is changing dramatically, and it's going to change more. And as we keep on changing more, I hope that more and more Australians can realise, like I said right at the beginning, let's build a different sort of society. I mean, we really are as insignificant enough to be able to get away with it. Nobody gives a fuck about what happens here. really, in the final analysis. As you've seen when George Bush came in, this was just a whistle-top one, just a rest night before he went to the real important stuff over here in Japan, with the people who really count in this part of the world. Incidentally, Robbie Thorpe was out here the other day. I should have got him to apologise for the weather yesterday. Robbie, for those of you who don't know, is renowned in the Koori movement for achieving some interesting things. For example, you may recall on Invasion Day this year, on the 26th of January, in the morning, when the Australia Day procession happened, it pissed down rain. A couple of hours later, when we had our reenactment down there at St Kilda Pier, the sun shone, mate. Not only that, don't forget, and this was said uttered publicly, when George Bush was in Melbourne, Robbie Thorpe put a curse on him. Do you remember what happened to George Bush when he went to Japan?
Oh, yeah.
I said to Robbie the next morning, I said, Robbie, it worked, mate. So there you are, there's a man not to cross.
What is a Jackie Jackie?
And Uncle Tom. You familiar with that term? In America, it's the same thing. Step and fetch it. All of these except Jackie Jackie basically American terms. Jackie Jackie, in fact, the term I think that was thought up by white fellows himself. The first Jackie Jackie was probably Bennelong. Bennelong's a sad story. Anyway.
What do you think is the relevance of disseminating Aboriginal languages like you? I think, say the record market, which is rural language, is it as part of something that is desirable as exists?
Do you remember back in 1988, on the 26th of January, there was this big bullshit telecast of the bicentennial. During that telecast, various prime ministers and other people around the world sort of come on telly and sort of make congratulations photos. Just prior to Bob Hawke going on television, what's his name? Long, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, or whatever, came on. And Longy, in the first minute or so of his speech, Maori, and I thought that that was just such a wonderful little thing in that telecast that day. I mean, so much was said by that, I don't know whether Longy intended to say what I took, what I got from it, what he did. But it was just it was a brilliant little thing that really sort of made it stick out the fact that Bob Hawke was talking in English, and no concession or no sort of anything was made to Aboriginal apart from the bullshit they got from his talk. I think that for Australian people to have the opportunity to say it's like, that should be one of the best things they've done. It's where it seems to me.
Well, maybe there's a misunderstanding because from what I understand, the reason that there's the work that's been done is because no one's been able to find any speakers.
I think you find that's bullshit. I think you find that's a gross lie. Whoever told you that, you're telling the Gary Foley said that that's a lie. It's not true. I mean, I've known any time in the last 20 years, in at least 3 dozen places, the line drawn between Sydney and the Victorian South Australian border over here on the coast. I could have taken people to university who wanted to sort of work with communities and say what's local language. There's plenty of people. But the old people are rapidly dying out. And that's usually where it is. And often old people will say no. I mean, white people used to come to my grandmother and ask her if she spoke the language, the local language. She used to tell them no.
Yeah, well, that's
And I used to believe that.
What do you do then? If the speakers
Comes back, like I said, this is why, yet another reason why the element of Koori control is important. If the Koori community genuinely desires, as you found out over there, if the Koori community desires genuinely to do something about saving something or whatever, then they are the ones who will initiate that, initiate the sort of program to do it. And someone like yourself or other, someone like a linguist who they wanted to, if they felt they needed a linguist, then they would be the ones who come and like you. Then you're not the one then who has to go looking for people to speak it, because then they produce them to you. And they've already gone through the bullshit work of establishing whether those people will do it or not. The white resource person then is not put in a situation where they've got to cajole these people into doing it. That's already been done. I mean, this is in the ideal situation, essentially. But I think that there's an enormous amount of work that can still be done down here, down this part of the world. And I suggest anyone who's interested in sussing that out a bit more, have a yarn to Eve out there at Eve Fitzroy at the Monash, what is it? The Monash...
Cruise, Aboriginal research.
Aboriginal research.
On Sunday there was a culture day for friends of Urunga, and before some of the dancing was done, they did introduce it in the language.
Gary, I'm now a newcomer here. It was really a culture shock to me to find out and going back to my dear PG, where there is certain amount of seats for them in the House of Representatives, of our lower house. I was wondering over here, is that a cultural thing not to get involved, or is it too wide a community that we maybe were very good?
There have been suggestions over the years that one of the things that could be done to redress the lack of Aboriginal representation in Parliament would be to create a system similar to New Zealand, where there's reserved seats for Aboriginal people. But I think there's a raging debate in the Aboriginal community at the moment over whether even going on the electoral roll, which is what some of the activists in the 60s were fighting for, to get us the right to vote. One of the current debates raging now is whether by exercising that right to vote, you are ceding your sovereignty, your sovereign right. And there is a certain line of argument which I adhere to. I refuse to be on the roll because I see that as acknowledging that they have invaded us and that it's given them some form of technical recognition of our ceding our sovereignty to them by participating in their system. Now that's a debate in certain Aboriginal communities at the moment. I think the feeling's pretty strong because that was one of the central points that we made when we called for the national boycott of the ATSIC election. Now 70% of the Aboriginal people did not vote in the ATSIC election. I would have thought that's a pretty conclusive boycott in anyone's terms, but as I said, Tickner claimed it as a great victory for democracy. And I think that a significant number of the people who didn't vote voted because of that issue. But then there's the other question anyway, of even if we did have the desire to either have seats like that set aside for people participating. I mean, there'd be so few votes in the Parliament itself, even via those seats, that you'd be an insignificant minority anyway, unless by some accident occasionally you've got the balance of power. But that's extremely unlikely, I would have thought, under the sort of system they were proposing. And there's also other people who argue that in certain parts of Australia, like in the northwestern New South Wales, in the Kimberleys, parts of the Northern Territory, the Aboriginal population are the majority in certain electorates and that. And in fact, some Aboriginal electorates do exercise a bit of say by giving people vote, but it's usually in the regional elections rather than the national one. But then again, what's the point of getting a few blackfellas in Parliament? I mean, Senator Neville Bonner, who was the first Aboriginal parliamentarian, well, I mean, what did he achieve? I mean, he didn't really have that much of a desire to do anything anyway, being liberal. But he, in his later life in the Parliament, when he learned a bit, he did become a bit of a renegade on the Liberal Party, whereby he did make some attempts to, in fact, Bonner tried to, I think, acknowledge that it's some form of light-black recognition of Aboriginal sovereignty anyway. I can't remember the exact detail. And I mean, he was impotent as a single person in there, as indeed would be even up to 10, 15 Aboriginal people. He wouldn't get there. I think that we've achieved far more effectively outside of that mainstream political electoral system. I think the sort of tactics that we've used in the last 20 years in terms of embarrassing Australian government, and we've constantly tried to make the point, although it's never really got through the Australian people, I've always made the point for the last 20 years, our battle and our argument is not with the Australian people themselves. As far as I'm concerned, the Australian people made their voice known, made their attitudes known, made their demands known with the 67 referendum. The people who have consistently subverted the expressed wishes of the Australian people as expressed in the 67 referendum, people who subverted those wishes ever since have been consecutive state and federal politicians and their bureaucrats with their little empires that they've built. Those are the people who are directly frustrating the Aboriginal people's attempts to gain what we think is just. And they're the people who our argument is with. And that's why we've used the tactics of embarrassment against them. I mean, that's why we've mounted these really effective campaigns internationally, trying to embarrass the Australian government into doing something. Big campaign that I was part of running in Germany about 10 years ago was so effective that Malcolm Fraser, who was Prime Minister at the time, was forced to get the Foreign Affairs Department to set up a little special committee within it to keep on monitoring what we were doing and churning out material to send to Germany to counter the sort of stuff that we were getting across, because we were backed by the Green Party over there at the time, and we had powerful friends in Germany, and we got extensive media coverage in Germany over a 3-month campaign that we conducted. Now that was a severe embarrassment to the Australian government, and there were certain direct concessions that came out of the Australian government at that time that as a result of that work. And so I think that if Australians ever sat down and thought about it, they would realise. I mean, look at the situation of other dispossessed, oppressed peoples in the world. The Palestinian people, for example. The Palestinian people were forced into a situation of such total desperation to get the world to sit up and take notice of their situation, that they were forced into doing the sort of things that some of the lunatic French still accuse them of being terrorists. Now, those sort of activities, which kill lots of people and cause an enormous amount of harm both to the Palestinians themselves and lots of other people, Australians should be really, really pleased that the Aboriginal people in Australia have never really needed, in the last 20 years anyway, to resort to those sort of tactics. There have been many people in the Koori community, including myself 20 years ago, who argued that these were the sort of tactics that would make the world sit up and take notice. I was a strong advocate of those sort of tactics 20 years ago. But I think that Australians should be thankful that we never found it practical or possible or even feasible to do that. And I think that a strong motivating factor in stopping us from doing that over the years was the basic humanitarianism of our society, because we were pulled up often when we talked in those sort of terms by some of the older people who gave us very wise counsel and sort of said, look at a different way of doing it. And so Australians should be grateful, in a sense, that Aboriginal people have seen that we can achieve certain things through a far more effective way. And I think that we have, there ain't any other segment of Australian society in the last 200 years, let alone the last 20, but in the last 25 years, the incredible social, political, economic change that Aboriginal people have been through. We've gone from being slaves, literally slaves, in 1967, living under a system of apartheid, total, absolute oppression. Not even citizens of Australia. That was just 25 years ago. And look at where we are now. Even the mining companies can't just rush in and do what they used to do. There will be a consequence. We can muster strong support. We can get a lot of what happens to us into the media and expose. That didn't used to happen way back. And so I think that we've come in an extraordinary way in just 25 years. But don't ever forget, and don't ever make a mistake of thinking, that we have got to where we are today because of the great, magnificent generosity or whatever of the Australian government. What we've got today, we fought every inch of the way to get. There ain't nothing that Koori's have got today that we didn't fight hard and long for. And most of what we've got today has been primarily through our own efforts. Primarily through our own efforts. Very few politicians could I name in my lifetime, that's been around in my lifetime, would I say have really done anything positive, constructive, and genuinely sort of, done anything for us. There's a lot of politicians who go around claiming to have done wonderful things for Aboriginal people, and you've only got to look every fucking, Queen's birthday or whatever it is, of what's left of these imperial awards and that, to look at the list of people who get awards. But these days there's Order of Australia, whatever it might be, but look at the numbers of people in those lists who get awards for services to the Aboriginal community. And you look at the number of those people who get awards for service to the Aboriginal community and figure out how many of them are blackfellas, not many. And sometimes I get great amusement looking at those awards that you have for years and years and years, because you find out who all the white fellas have been working in your community. And usually the people who get these awards are the people who've done the worst things to Aboriginal people, almost inevitably. So if you know anyone out there who's got an OBE or something for service to Aboriginal people, don't come telling me about it. I'm not going to pat them on the back. And so, well folks, it is with a heavy heart that I announce the imminent completion of this interesting exercise. I don't know about you lot, but I intend to go and partake of a few soft beers, light beers, which I'm open for anyone to shout me, so desire. In the next weeks or so, like I said, I've got some videos here that people are welcome to borrow, but like I said, if you don't give them back, you're in deep trouble. If you want to come and visit and have a look at some of the organisations, give us a ring over the next few weeks. Don't be put off by the fact I'm hard to get on that number. Usually the best way to do it is ring up, leave a message with your number on it, and I get messages within the hour at that place, but I'm not often there. But that's how you find me. Contact me and we'll arrange at mutual convenience for people to be able to go and visit some of the organisations. Some of that might be interesting if people are interested. If there's anything that I haven't covered for you personally on this course, give us a ring and I'll talk to you next week. Here are some 3CR, program guides, which show you when the Koori program's on. You just want to maintain contact with what's happening in the Koori community. Listen to those radio programs, and usually many of the functions or whatever's happening in the community that may be of interest is broadcast on those things, and that's one of the ways in which people find out what's happening. So if you want to be involved in future things, do that. You just want to have an ongoing sort of involvement, get involved and pay the rent bill. It's a good educative way of doing things. And they hold a lot of interesting little educative exercises, like that Invasion Day action was organised by the Fitzroy Pay the Rent bill. And that was an educative thing, and that showed what should have happened in 1788. And as such, it was a good exercise, humorous. A lot of people enjoyed it out in the sun because Robbie turned the sun on for us. And so it was a positive day. And we had another one where we went for this tour around the city streets. We served an eviction notice on the Supreme Court, but in the course of walking through the city street, we gave our supporters a guided tour of sites of significance in the city of Melbourne, explaining some of the historical things that took place in these places, what significance this was to the Aboriginal community. In some instances, a site where there was a site of traditional importance to the Koori people. In other instances, a site where maybe some Aboriginal hero got hung, or another site where there was a battle, or another site where, you know, Aboriginal people had this happen to them in the past. And some of those exercises are interesting too.
Is there only the Fitzroy program? There's not anywhere else?
Sorry?
There's only the Fitzroy
There's
program.
various parents groups springing up around the traps. You'd have to get on to write a letter to Robbie and get him to let you know where the nearest one is to you. They're in the process of mushrooming around the traps. You can even start up a parliamentary group yourself.
Yeah.
Your area, where you come from. And if you belong to whatever organisations, anything around the traps who would like to have a Koori speaker to come out and spread the word even further, that's another thing to get onto us about. Monty up the back here does stuff as well as me and Robbie, and you know, there's no shortage of Koori speakers around. One of the things I regret about this course this week is that I would have liked to have had a few more Koori women speakers in to talk to us, but in the next course that's one of the things I'm going to change. There's no shortage of really good Koori speakers who can come out and address an organisation if you want to organise for them to be invited and all the rest of it. Again, contact either me or Robbie Thorpe, through this number and address here. Okay, folks, that's it. I'm going to adjourn to the Clyde Hotel. The Clyde's just down in the corner of Elgin and Cardigan. Yesterday when we went in there was all these young people there from this university. I hope the place not going to be packed out then. If that is packed, I'm just trying to think of an alternative. It's close. But we'll go there for a start. Yeah. So let's go there, folks. Anyone who wants to come, feel welcome. Feel free.